like, I want mine on like that.
That's what we just said.
Yeah, my iPad.
My
It usually looks like that.
my computers are ahead of everybody else.
Pick it up for.
That's what I said. His friend
Yeah.
says
Oh,
had enough.
okay.
Something else that he was from Stanley. Where?
Be patient.
All right, we are at 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the May County Board Supervisors meeting to order. Would you please join me for a pledge of allegiance in a moment of silence? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, roll call will show we have 20 supervisors present, 1 absent. We'll then move on to approval of the agenda. I would seek a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Possible consent.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none, call the vote. Agenda is approved. We will move on to members of the public wishing to be heard. First up, we have Darren Sen. Come up to the podium, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here tonight to speak on regarding the 8.1 item number on your agenda. My name is Darren Sen. As he stated, I'm the current president of the Chippewa Valley Music Festivals Board. I've been involved with the festival since about 2000. First, actually, as a younger man, I played music there. Actually got the opportunity to perform there a few times. And then eventually became a board member and again, serve on that board now. So I have kind of a unique perspective on the music festivals. What I can tell you is this provides more than just a giant economic impact to the area. It provides a community of sorts, and it's precious. The fact is, festivals all over the country are going out of business every year, and it's really a difficult industry. It's not as easy as it looks to get that many people together safely and put on an event that people want to come back to year after year. And they do. They want to come back and buy tickets in a lot of cases without even knowing who the artists are that are coming. And I think that speaks to the fact that for their mental well-being, this is their escape. This is their chance to relax with family and friends in a safe environment and enjoy a show. That being said, again, this is a difficult industry. And by difficult, a couple more examples are this year, AIBA, which is an organization of festivals in the country, all over the country, both fairs as well as music venues get together and they have their meetings. And at the last annual meeting that our general manager, Wade, was at, attendance was down 20%. That's never happened before. We're in a tough economic environment right now. Granted, economies ebb and flow all the time. We have good times and tough times. We're not in one of the good times right now. It's very difficult. And there's a lot of people struggling out there with the cost of goods and inflation with where it's at. Another example of that very thing is the fact that there are festivals out there giving away tickets right now. Literally giving tickets away, hoping to make something on beverage sales or other vendors. So when we see increases coming down the pike, and we have many of them, everything's increased cost. We all see it. We see it at the festival side too. All the vendors and all of our support all cost more money every single year. And so again, I support the executive committee's recommendation to the board tonight on item 8.1. And that helps curb some of the increase in costs that we're seeing at the festival level. So thank you for your time. And I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Next up, we have Wade Asher.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I sincerely appreciate it. And I promise to try not to wear out the welcome with all these speeches. I'm sure you guys have seen enough of me already. First, I want to thank Andy Alvarado and the executive committee for the forward-thinking approach and their willingness to work collaboratively on this contract. The level of partnership is important, and I appreciate it. Regarding agenda item 8-1 with the Chippewa Music Festival's contract in the county, while I understand many of the items lean in favor of the county, I am generally supportive of the changes and want to make sure that 4A stays the same as laid out unanimously by the executive committee. The addition of double time plus benefits is something we simply just cannot absorb. This year alone, it represents a minimum of $50,000 in additional cost to us. More concerning is this provision was added through the union contract without a discussion or input from us, and the outcome of that negotiation impacted only our operation while ultimately benefiting the county's position in their union contract. That is difficult to accept, especially for our business that contributes as much to this community and county as ours does. To be clear, I fully support the county providing fair wages and raises to its officers. Frankly, they deserve it. I wouldn't want to do that job. But that responsibility should not be placed entirely on our backs. The county should assume the responsibility for the additional time requirement it implemented. In speaking with Travis Hakes, he shared that there are ways to reduce the burden on the county through thoughtful scheduling and staffing strategies. I would encourage you to allow him to manage that responsibility accordingly, ensuring it is handled efficiently and with attention to detail. It is also important to remember that the scale of what these festivals contribute. We account for more than 50% of the economic impact in the Chippewa County is tied to these events. Last year alone, we paid $1.2 million in sales tax and generated an additional $5.5 million in economic impact sales tax revenue. That is massive. I feel it's also important, respectively, to address some of the statements that have been made regarding the safety at my events. The board has heard comments describing the grounds as extremely dangerous, like a beehive, that officers are outnumbered, that all officers are needed in a fight, and even statements like, "I'm afraid for my life despite being armed." Respectfully, that is not accurate representation of what occurs, and any mid-level incident is 3% of the calls at hoofbeat only. I'm on the grounds 24/7 during these events. I personally check with EMS officers and my security staff at least once a day and get daily reports. The consistent feedback I receive that things are calm, controlled, and largely uneventful. We run a very, very tight operation, and we take safety extremely serious. We simply do not experience the level of issues that are being described. If needed, I'm more than welcome to get you guys provide extensive documentation, testimonials, reports, camera footage to support all of that. In closing, I want to emphasize this. Aside from this double time issue, I have never come before this board asking for special treatment or additional benefits. Our focus has always been on contributing, whether it's through economic impact, supporting local nonprofits, investing in events like Farm Tech, or offering solutions like a command station for the sheriff's office. But I have to be honest, if this level of financial burden is placed on us without a balanced approach, it becomes very difficult for us to continue to go above and beyond for this community in the same ways that we always have. And that's not something I want, not for us, not for Chippewa County. I care deeply about this community, and I value our partnership with the county. My goal is to continue to work together in a way that is fair, sustainable, and mutually beneficial. Thank you again for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Jackie Hollub.
Members of the County Board, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again today. My name is Jackie Holub, and I am here regarding Agenda Item 8.1. I would also like to thank Andy Alvarado and the Executive Committee for their time, their effort, and their willingness to bring this forward to the full board. A few months ago, I stood here and I spoke about the role of our festivals play in this community. And today, I'd like to speak about a little more personal place why this truly matters. Because right now, in so many ways, it feels like people are drifting further apart. We see it in our conversations, in our communities, and even in our own families sometimes. Differences feel louder than similarities, and real, shared human connection, the kind where people simply come together without judgment, is harder and harder to find. And that's why what we do matters so much. At our music festivals, something different happens. People don't show up as labels or opinions. They show up as people, as parents, as friends, as neighbors. You'll see complete strangers strike up a conversation. They laugh together, they help one another, and by the end of the night, they don't feel like strangers anymore. For a few days, the walls we carry in our everyday lives start to fall away. It's hard to fully explain that unless you've seen it. But there's something powerful about standing in a crowd with thousands of people singing the same song, feeling the same moment, and in that place, nobody is divided. Nobody is arguing. They're just connected. You'll see kindness in its simplest forms, someone offering water to a stranger, someone helping another person who's feeling overwhelmed. People look out for each other, not because they have to, but because they want to. And that's not just entertainment, that's humanity. At a time when loneliness and mental health struggles are at an all-time high in our community, these moments matter more than we realize. They remind people that they're not alone. They remind people that they belong. Our festivals don't just create memories, they create connection. They create pride in where we live. They bring people into this county and who leave with a feeling of not just a good event, but of a community where people care. And that is something special, and that's something worth protecting. So today, I'm asking you to continue down a path that brings people together, not one that risks pulling things apart. I ask that you please pass the contract with Chippewa Valley Music Festivals as it stands and allow us to keep doing the work that has such a meaningful impact on this community. Because at the end of the day, when the music plays and people come together, we're reminded of something simple yet very powerful. We have far more in common than that which divides us. And that's worth something worth holding on to. So I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Next up, we have Charlie Parkhurst.
Oh, I'm Charlie Parkhurst. I'm here to talk about the new routes that we've been working on here in Chippewa County. We have 7 clubs here, and we all seem to have, every year we add a little bit more routing to our ATV routes to try to get more people, their areas that they live, everything, so they can all just travel from home without trailering every place they go. So we have 4 of them that are on your agenda tonight here that you're voting on. One is up into town in Tilden. That accesses the whole area, all the housing all around down by Next Gen Power Sports down there. So there's a lot of people down there that have side-by-sides that are riding around the country. So that is one of the things. And then we have the Highway 53 overpass up in the town of Tilden there, just north of the village. That's going to access the village all the way north to Bloomer, or vice versa back down towards Chippewa Falls. Then we have another item that's over in the township of Anson. There's another small subdivision over there that we applied for that allows that subdivision to be able to ride from their homes. And then we have another section that's up just east of New Auburn. And there's a whole massive area up there that allows that road to be open and get people down through there. So I'd like to thank the county board for taking on our applications and looking them over and bringing it forward to the county board, and thank the county board to take action on it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to number 6, consent agenda. I would look for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Next second.
A motion and a second. One call out, you'll see on number 2 there, schedule next meeting date. We do have a special meeting next Tuesday. That is obviously out of the ordinary, so please make note of that. All right, any questions on consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. Consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to reports. Department reports, monthly statements of claims filed.
You will see in your packet, there was a claim on there, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to Corporation Counsel.
All right, we'll move on to financial update, 2025 pre-audited and first quarter 2026. Leah.
All right. So I first will present to you the 2025 unaudited financial report. Just a couple definitions. I won't typically go over these with you guys, but since it's a new board, I'll just touch on a couple of these. So for the fund is really just a segment of accounts for different purposes, kind of similar to if you have multiple businesses and you want to keep track of them individually. So for the different funds, we actually have a couple different funds. So the general fund, if the departments don't fall in one of the other ones, then they automatically go into the general fund. It's where most of the different departments live. For the special revenue fund, the departments that are in the special revenue fund are more for the departments that receive restricted revenues or state dollars and more of those types of different funds. And that's like the public health, human services, sales tax, things like that. Debt service is just where we put our annual bond payments. Capital projects, so when we issue bonds, our bond dollars actually go into a capital projects fund, so we can separate those dollars out and report on them separately. And then we have the enterprise funds, so this is actually treated like a private business, and that is actually our land development fund. And then internal services fund, that is for the accounting that's really going in between different departments, like our self-funded health insurance. So kind of similar, every different department goes into there. And then the fiduciary fund is the last one that we have. And those are dollars that are not county dollars. Those will go for state fees and things like that that we collect and then have to spend or send back to the state. And here's just some couple more definitions. The fund balance is basically, think of it like your own personal savings accounts, like where we can carry forward monies for some for purposes, specified purposes, and some for just general. The lapsing funds is where we close out the expenses and revenues, and we close that out year after year. These are not carried forward, and they do not have a specific purpose. The lapsing are funds where we do carry those forward and have a specific purpose, and I'll get into those a little bit more in the presentation. Okay, so 2025, like I said, these are pre-audited numbers, and the auditors actually showed up this week, so they will be back in August or September to give a final presentation to 2025 end result. So similar to other presentations, these are the general fund, so you can see the different departments that are in the general fund. I will just go over the ones that are highlighted. For general county, I do want to point out that that loss is actually due to transfers in and transfers out between the different lapsing and non-lapsing accounts, and I'll get into the detail a little more on that in the future or in the presentation. Department of Admin, that is made up of several different departments, 7 different departments, and just a couple of the larger items in that balance is criminal justice services actually had a positive variance in there of just over $93,000. mainly due to additional revenues that they received for first-time offender fees. Facility and Parks had a positive of $112,000 due to savings on gas for heating. And then every year we budget for the 7/1 increases for employees into a department we call budget adjustments, and that was $225 in there. The real big number in that is the KIP projects that are commingled through facilities. It's actually in a different division, so we track it separately, but that's the reason why that number is so high. It's KIP projects that have been approved but not yet spent. Treasurer, so we had our interest rates are starting to decline in there, I will say, just so that we have an idea of where those have been at. In January of 22, the interest rate for our state investment pool was 0.07%. In 23, it did go up to 5.38%, but we are slowly declining. And at the end of 25, we were at 3.82% interest. So it is trending a little on the downward spiral there. Register of Deeds, you see they did have a positive net gain on there of just over 100,000. Ironically, they have been under budget for most of the year and then came alive at the end. So they did end up pretty well. They did receive additional revenues and then kept their expenses under budget. And on this, so Sheriff's Department, I do want to point out, it does look like they had 433,000 gain on that. It's similar to the Department of Administration. They also have KIP projects in a different division within that, so that's where that gain is coming from. And I have a slide that will show a little bit more detail on the Sheriff's Department. And then land conservation, they did have some stumpage revenues were about $285,000 higher than that were budgeted. And here's just some highlights of what I just kind of spoke about. If you have any questions, just let me know. And this that I want to point out for the county clerk, you'll see they did have a gain of $5,400 and in the elections division. And end of 25, a new non-lapsing account was approved for them. So those dollars are now into the new non-lapsing account. So those will be saved to help with the ebb and flow of the elections. So those will be dollars that will be saved for future use. Some more highlights. So here you'll see the Sheriff's Department in the different divisions that are within that Sheriff's Department. So you can see I did put on the side there what are lapsing and non-lapsing. Remember, the lapsing does not have a specific purpose and the non-lapsing does, and those carry over. Most of the overages, I will say, are due to wages and overtime in those departments. And you can see on, let's see if I can get my pointer, the Sheriff's Department, that line there, the equipment, that is where the approved KIP dollars and located in. Those will carry over for projects that have been approved, but the dollars haven't quite been spent yet. So in the summary on the bottom there, you'll see the Sheriff's Department actually did have a loss of $65,000, and then their non-lapsing is what's causing that gain in that account in this division. Any questions? So here's just some highlights. And some more. Okay. So here we'll get into the transfers with the non-lapsing and lapsing accounts. So before any transfers in 2025, our unassigned general fund balance would have increased by $3,290,000 and change due to the lapsing accounts. So the accounts that close out that do not have a specific purpose. With compliance of the fund balance policies, we did transfer a total of $2,147,789 between the lapsing and non-lapsing accounts. Or, excuse me, just the lapsing, the non-lapsing accounts, sorry, non-lapsing. So example is for ADRC. You'll see we did transfer over 190,000 because the ADRC has a max balance of 550,000 for their non-lapsing account. So that means they were over that 550,000, so we transferred the remaining amount into the unassigned general fund balance. So after those transfers had been all done and completed, we would have increased the fund balance by $5,438,339. To keep us from having to budget additional dollars for upcoming projects or any unforeseen issues or circumstances that arise, the county administrator is utilizing to move $333,630 into these different programs or divisions to help offset future costs. So the first one, we're transferring over $1 million into the self-funded health insurance fund. So with that, we did have a $1.2 million loss in our self-funded health insurance. I'll get into the details of that a little bit down the line here. So we did put some money in there to help offset some of those increasing expenses. Property and liability did have a loss in that account, so we transferred those over. I know I put County M, but it's really at the M Bridge. And then County T funding, we did transfer over $1 million to help with those upcoming larger projects. And then land development, we put in 750,000. And then the juvenile detention, we did transfer over 233,000. And this is because we transferred 133,000 into the jail to help offset some costs for housing a juvenile. And then we just replenished that and then added an extra $100,000 for any $100,000 for any future juveniles. That's a lot of information. Are there any questions on this? So now we'll get into the special revenue funds. So on the far right there, you'll see the actual gain and loss. This is after transfers have been completed. So for example, ADRC you see as a zero. Remember, we did transfer over 190,000 out of that as they were at their max for their non-lapsing account. And Human Services actually had a net gain of 946,000, and this was mainly due to when somebody decides to move on from employment here, there's some gap in between those positions, so some of it is cost savings from that gap, health insurance, and then also some indirect costs that were captured through the RWC program. And here are just some highlights of the different accounts. So here we have the sales tax. So you see we did have a 3.78% sales tax growth from 2024. The sales tax is governed from Ordinance 2-361. And that ordinance does state that the revenues cannot be used until the subsequent budget year. So all of the revenue that we received in 2025 will be budgeted in the 2027 budget. So those funds will be used at that point. And the opioid fund, very similar to the sales tax, where we are not using the revenue received until the subsequent budget cycle. And that does have policies surrounding this, kind of acts as the same way as our KIP, where we do have to go through the approval process for any approved projects or spending. So debt service, this fund is where all of our annual debt principal and interest payments are. So you'll see at the end of 2025, our outstanding balance was $8,510,000. Capital projects, so when we do go out for bond, those dollars that we receive do go into this separate fund, so we can track for those expenses separately. And in 2024, we did bond the I think it was 3.5 million, and then these dollars are going to be spent in 2025 and then again in 2026 for highway projects. The enterprise fund, this is where the land development fund just included some of the language surrounding the use of that land for the sale of the property. We did sell one property this year not related to the Wissota Business Park. And then we also transferred in $170,000 for future projects. So internal services funds, this is where the work comp fund is, or self-funded work comp insurance. They actually did have a gain of 1.1 million in this fund. We transferred out 939,000. Before this transfer, they actually had a positive variance of just 625,000. However, the adjustment was to the payable claims that we have, the outstanding liability. Last year in 2024, it swung the opposite way. So we had larger liability for claims payment. This year it swung to the good, so we have less claims payable, which increased that balance. And then you'll see the self-funded health insurance. Like I said earlier, they did have a $1.2 million loss, but we did transfer in $1 million in order to help replenish some of that loss. These are pre-audited numbers, just remember. So I know there's a couple adjustments that need to be made, hopefully to the good. But they still are we are still at a loss in that fund. And then the self-funded the self-funded liability insurance, we also had a loss in that due to a combination of higher claim expenses, and then that claims payable liability was adjusted as well. And here's some highlights on that. And then the trust agency fund is the dog license fund, and we need to keep a balance in there of $1,000. That is the end of 2025. Are there any questions before I move on to 26? Okay. So here, presentation will look very similar. This is for January through March of 26. What I look for here is revenues that are under 25% and then expenses that are over 25%. So you'll see the general county is under 25%. That is because we do not receive our state shared revenue until fourth quarter, generally around October, November. So we don't receive those dollars until the end of the year. So that will look a little out of whack for a while. And then the county clerk, you will see the expenses are at 77.5%. That is because the library payment comes out at the beginning of the year, and that was just over $1 million. So her revenues will catch up towards the end of the year. And Register of Deeds, you'll see the revenues are low, and this is pretty much how I reported it last year. And then at the end of the year, you'll see they came alive. So I'm hoping that'll be the same thing. The patterns are trending the same. And then child support also does show a loss in there. They are under budget for revenues, and that's because they receive their state aid quarterly. So we usually get it the month after I close. So they're always a little off. And some highlights. And special revenue funds. Public health, ADRC, and human services generally receive their funding a month after the report. So January's funding or January's expenses, they receive the funding in February, so on. So there's a month lag there. And then human services, the RWC, the Recovery and Wellness Consortium, they actually receive their Medicaid dollars 2 to 3 months afterwards. But in March, we did receive a $5 million advance payment, which we typically receive at the beginning of the year to help offset some of that, because we spend that money and then we receive the revenues later. Jail assessment, you'll see, is just a little under there. I have been under for a while, so I'll continue to watch that one. And then land records is also under in revenues, but they do not have any expenses yet for this year. And so sales tax is, we don't receive those dollars until 2 months later. So you'll see we've only received one payment for 2026. So we've only received January so far. Very similar to what January was like last year. So not really sure how that one's going to trend quite yet. And opioids, so these are approved spending. That was approved through last year's budget process, and then the revenues we've received so far this year, which is all interest. Debt service, again, this is where our principal and interest payments come out of for our bond. If we were not to bond in 2026, our outstanding balance would be $6,630,000. As you're aware, we will be bringing some bonding resolutions to you next month. So if that is approved, obviously that number will change. Capital projects. So here's the other half of the 2024 bond dollars, the 1.7 that will be used for highway projects in 2026. And internal services funds. The health insurance you'll see is not a negative number. I'm hoping this is going to continue through 2026. However, it's a little too early to get my hopes up. But we'll continue to monitor that. But so far, we are okay. And then the self-funded liability insurance, the premiums come out at the beginning of year, and then we do an insurance allocation between the different departments to receive those revenues in November or towards the end of the year. So that's the reason why the expenses are high on that one. And trust and agency or enterprise trust and agency funds, not a lot of activity. The dog license fund you'll see is at a negative right now, or actually at a positive, but the payment went out in April instead of March this year. So that will zero out in my next report. That is 2026. Any questions?
All right, thank you. We'll move right along to the 2027 budget process review. Leah.
3 years and about 20 minutes. All right, so here is the budget process that we will be starting for 2027. So this is a table of contents and some items we'll be going over tonight. Purpose of the budget. So the purpose of the budget is really to develop a financial plan that will be approved by the county board for the following year. So this year, 2026, you will be approving the budget for 2027. Just I want to point out that we do need to comply with the state imposed levy limits when setting the levy amount every year. So there are 3 phases to our budget. The department had requested, county administrator proposed, and the county board approved. Couple definitions. The one I do want to mention is the first one, that position-based budget, or the PBB. This is our salary, wages, and benefits for all the employees. So we work off of this and then incorporate that into all of the different departments' budgets. So I will be referring to that. So just want to point that one out. A couple more definitions. So this is a very simplistic shot of how the levy is calculated. So you will see that we take the tax. So we take the levy divided by the equalized value, which gives you the rate, multiply that by 100, and that is how, 1,000, and that is how we get the actual tax rate. There's a lot more work that goes into this, just a very simple demonstration of how that is calculated. So this is just a breakdown for the 2026 budget. So you can see what our total expenses are, our revenues, and then the tax levy. The 2026 budget is out on the county website if you want to go look at that. And here is just a slide for history for the tax rate, equalized valuation, and property tax for the last 5 years. So you see our tax rate has been decreasing over the last 5 years. And here's just a comparison of different tax rates throughout the county. This information is pulled from the county fact book, which is published by Forward Analytics. You see here, we are the sixth lowest, have the sixth lowest tax rate in the state. So that's pretty good. We've been there for a couple of years now. You can see the counties with the highest tax rate. And then on the far right there, it shows the surrounding counties and what their tax rates are. So budget roles and responsibilities. So the county administrator's role is, or county administrator is required to provide a sales tax plan and propose a balanced budget for the county board for approval. DOA, or Department of Administration, prepares the PBB, reports for the budget, and coordinates with the county clerk to publish the budget summary in October. The department heads are responsible for developing a balanced budget consistent with the budget guidelines provided by the county administrator, and they also meet with their respective policy committees to review the department's budgets. Policy committees meet with the respective department heads to review their requested budget, make any recommendations to the budgets, and then they'll forward the department head requested budget onto the county administrator. I just want to note that policy committees do not actually approve the department head requested budget. You were just simply forwarding it on to the county administrator. The executive committee serves as the policy committee for the departments listed on that second bullet. And they also receive the county administrator's proposed budget in October to review and make any recommendations prior to it being published and forwarded on to the county board for consideration. The county board then reviews and approves the sales tax resolutions, allocating the sales tax funds, reviews and debates the county administrator proposed budget, and makes any final changes before approving. They also make a motion to approve the balanced budget, and finally, they approve the resolution adopting the tax levy. Here is a brief timeline of the budget, and I'll go into each month. So right now is the kickoff of the 2027 budget process with this presentation. After this, the county administrator will send out a budget letter to the different department heads with budget guidance. DOA will be sending preliminary PBBs to the departments for review and making any proposed changes. The changes are like overtime amounts, any LTE or limited term employee changes, hours changes. They can request new positions, anything like that. Okay. In June, the DOA will send out final PBBs to department heads, and they will use that to incorporate the wages and benefits into their department their requested budgets. These also include any of the changes that were requested and approved. Also in June, the county administrator will present a KIP plan along with the resolutions at the exec and county board. Mid-late June to July, the departments will prepare their budgets and bring them to their policy committees for review. Reminder, these are the department head requested budgets, and this is the end of the first phase of the budget process. In August, we'll be compiling the budget information, meeting with the different department heads about their budget. The county administrator will present a resolution for any new positions, health insurance changes, wage increases, if there are any. In October, the county administrator then presents the proposed budget to the executive committee, and the budget summary is published 15 days, at least 15 days prior to the public hearing. This is the end of the second phase. So in November, the county board, or the county administrator will present the proposed budget to the county board. There are two county board meetings in November regarding the budget. So the first The first meeting of November is on Thursday, November 5th. This is the public hearing, the budget hearing where the public can give comments about the proposed budget. After public hearing is closed, the administrator will then present the proposed budget to the county board. And then generally at the end of the meeting will be approved for the 2027 budget. This is where the county board then debates and makes any final changes before, or to approve the balanced budget. And then the following Tuesday, November 10th, is the second county board meeting. And at this meeting is where you will actually approve the resolution for the levy for the 2027 budget. That ends the budget process. Any questions on that?
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the business items section of our agenda. And before we dive in, I just want to make a clarification point because obviously agenda item 1 and 2 are related to one another. The reason I want to just kind of call it out is agenda item 1 is a contract approval, which requires a simple majority. And if agenda item number 2 is needed to be taken up, it is a mid-year budget adjustment would require a 2/3 majority. So that even though they're related, they have different bars for approval. So having said that, we'll move on to business item number 1, Chippewa Valley Music Festival 2024 to 2028 agreement. And I would look for a motion to approve to put it on the floor.
Rocky will make a motion to approve.
Second, a motion is second. Mr. Alvarado, you could break it down for us, please.
So what we have for you to consider tonight is an amended and restated 24 to 28 Chippewa Valley Music Festivals, Inc. Law Enforcement Services Agreement. So this agreement was really originally put in place starting with the 24 festival season. It was amended for the first time in 25 to address the addition of the Force Fields event and clarify some things there. And then we're bringing forth an amended and restated agreement that incorporates the prior amendment, but also adds in some additional amendments based on the changes to the ordinance, the large assembly ordinance that were made in February of this year. And so in the memo I attached, I outline them. I'll go over them briefly. The new language is in paragraph 3B. This incorporates amendments to section 1467 of the ordinance related to security personnel and law enforcement staffing. For those of you who were on the board then, you recall that this has to do with the number of law enforcement and security personnel that have to be on site, depending on what activities are occurring on the festival grounds. So as things ramp up, the staffing requirements go up, and as things ramp down during the day, they can adjust their staffing accordingly. They were somewhat doing that already, but the ordinance really was silent on flexibility in times of the day. So that ordinance amendment was made, and we're incorporating that language into section 3B of the contract. And that's based on communication between the sheriff's office and the festival, and the sheriff's office prior experience with the festival and what the schedule for the day is there. In addition, paragraph 12 was added, and this has to do with an appeal process. The ordinance prior contract did not have anything specific to, if the festival, we invoice the festival and they have some disagreement or take, they want to appeal the amount of charges. This outlines the process under an administrative review process. So it's something we actually, obviously earlier this year considered their requests to have some of the 25 expenses waived. We didn't have a process that we still worked it through the executive committee and brought it to the board. This actually puts something in writing in the ordinance. And then we also clarified items in paragraph under compensation under 4C, just to clean up a little bit on the timeline to make sure, when we get an invoice to the festivals, the timeline then that they have to pay. If we don't get it to them in time, they don't have to pay on the original schedule. They have to pay by the end of the month of the following month. So that puts that into writing as well. And then the final item is under 4A, compensation. I should point out, we wanted to reopen the contract to incorporate the ordinance amendments, and Chippewa Valley Music festivals had notified us earlier this year that they wanted to reopen to address items as well. And this under 4A is one that they had requested that the compensation prior had been, at the overtime rate of pay, subject to the collective bargaining agreements. And this is the issue you are, I'm sure, aware of, that the union contract that went into effect last year, July 1 of last year, says all non-governmental contract hours are paid at double time. And the request from the festival is to pay it time and a half. We will still be obligated to pay double time to those union employees who put in overtime hours at the festivals. But per the contract and the amendment by the executive committee, the festival would only reimburse us at time and 1/2. And that amendment was approved, and that's how it's presented to you tonight, is at time and 1/2.
What questions do we have? Supervisor Gehring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I need to preface what I'm going to say with an apology. My iPad has been down for a little over a week, so I haven't been able to visualize a lot of this, so I apologize if I'm incorrect in some of my statements. So the way I understand it is we have an ordinance that talks about events type and size. And I also understand that we have a contract with our employees for a certain amount of money. So the executive committee unanimously suggested that we lower the charge, not the pay, the charge from double time to time and a half. So my question is simple to the executive committee: where does the money come from? I need to know this before I can make a decision pro or con.
Do you want me to explain the second item?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, based on just what the chair had explained before we opened this up, is that we did, so the executive committee did forward you to that contract with the difference between time and a half and double time. And so we attached a second item related to the budget impact of that. If this contract as presented were to go through, effectively we would be needing to come up with the money to fill in the budget because we'd be paying out double time, you're only receiving time and a half, which creates a structural deficit within the sheriff's office budget. So best practice would be if you were to do that, we should somehow rectify the budget now, or at least get some direction on how to handle that. And so the second memo, I kind of outlined what the estimated cost would be based on the 3 festivals, just specific to this contract, the Chippewa Valley Music Festivals. Whatever you do tonight, we anticipate we'll be bringing back a contract next month for One Fest, which we also have a contract for, and would want to amend that contract similarly. So, I listed 3 options within that the write-up. Could direct the sheriff to adjust his operations to accommodate the loss of revenue. And I'm estimating between 35 to 50,000. Ultimately, the budget impact we can't pinpoint today because we don't know how many union employees will put hours in versus we have some exempt employees who are not under the union contract to put in overtime. We have some jailers that are LESB certified, can put hours in, but are not under the union contract. And we also, the last number of years, have been using law enforcement from other jurisdictions that do not fall under a union contract. Ultimately, it depends on, the dollar amount will depend on how many hours our Chippewa County union employees will be working overtime out there. But regardless, however many hours they work, we'll need to come up with 25% of their pay that will not be recovered from the event. So again, number 1 is directing the sheriff to figure it out and come up with the money in his budget. Number 2 option I put there is that the general fund is used to make up the difference of the unreimbursed amount of wages worked by Chippewa County law enforcement at the 26 events, whatever that number ends up being, and do nothing. You could just let the sheriff's office and our county budget roll into the red, and at the end of the year, we'll have to figure out how to balance the budget out. I mean, there are other options, but I thought those are the 3 most likely scenarios to give you. And that's why we explained that the contract is a majority vote. Really, if you're going to create a budget deficit, you should give us a direction, which would be a 2/3 to amend the budget.
So if I understand, your 3 options are the sheriff's department, which is already at risk for budget override. And the other things are going to come out of money that the county could use for other things that are of importance also.
That's a way of,
Understand that right?
that's a way of putting it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll, I guess, add on to the, having the sheriff's department absorb it is probably not likely, given that they've traditionally are over budget as it is, without any changes.
Supervisor Lotz.
Thank you, Chairman Bergeron. May I ask permission to direct a few questions to the sheriff as he's the primary scheduler and doing the invoices?
Yes.
Sheriff Hicks, what's the percentage of the county deputies that are on the union?
I don't know the hard fast number, but I would say it's more than 50% would be in the WPPA, because it would include the majority of the patrol staff and the investigators. The only ones not in the union would be the supervisory positions, the reserves, and then I think there's 7 or 8 jail staff.
Okay, and how many of the union deputies work all 3 or 1, 2, or 3 of the festivals?
Pretty much every union employee works every one of their days off, so every one of the festivals, every WPPA employee, with the absence of 1 or 2 that are requested vacation that I approved, every union employee will work at least 1 day of every festival.
And once they start a shift at the festival, do they already have their 40 hours in, so they're automatically on?
That was a
Overtime.
point of conversation that occurred actually today, and I believe they had reached out to Director Leah there for clarification on that. But yes, it's my understanding that the hours that they work there are all overtime, so they would be all billed double.
Thank you.
All right, Supervisor Bachman.
Similar to Pete's hearings over there, I was kind of curious of where the executive committee come up with the idea of not covering that other half. And as he said, you're asking the general public, the general taxpayers, to cover this so that a private event can be held. Is this a wise move that the general taxpayers of the county are covering, say, 50,000 that they mentioned versus the event itself covering it? My question was to the exec also, like, how did you come up with the logic that they come from other services and other taxes instead of the cost bearer bear the cost? Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Hennick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need to have a pre-question to clarify what I need to ask. Are the officers who serve here, have they already done their 40 hours a week and now they're on extra duty?
That's what it sounded like coming from the sheriff a moment ago, yes.
And they're not getting their time off to recuperate? When they are they forced to do this, or are they volunteer to do this?
Mr. Sheriff?
So Sergeant Clark puts out the request for schedule, so we actually have kind of a working document for force fields. I can tell you that the majority of the people volunteered, so pretty much everybody volunteered to work. We were just by nature of employment status, a couple people short of what we need for peak times, so we put out a mutual aid request. But the bulk of the people actually volunteered and said, these are the hours I'm available, and those were the hours that they were scheduled, so.
So my questions are, does the people who run the fair have the option to provide their own security? And we get out of the business whatsoever?
Just to clarify, I'm going to say that the festivals, under the large assembly ordinance, are required to have a law enforcement contract. So in our ordinance, it requires a certain amount of deputies, deputy per 800 people or 1,000, depending on whether alcohol is served. And then also a requirement for private security. So the festival has to provide their own security as well. So both are required, the way our large assembly ordinance is written currently.
They cannot substitute all private for the use and exclude the licensed law enforcement. They do not have that option.
Thank you.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I guess the other, since we pay out double time on these off hours, like, and then we sub out, right, Sheriff? We're gonna reach out to like Eau Claire County or whatever to grab some deputies. When they adjust their contracts to pay out double time, are we on a hook to pay that too?
So when we contract for mutual aid, they send us a bill for the true and accurate cost of what it costs to send their employee. So some of the agencies that we get mutual aid from, make more per hour than we do. Some of them make less than we do. But they're all time and a half is my understanding on what they bill us for is time and a half. So when we get billed that time and a half, we pay that as a county and then Fest reimburses us for that bill.
Supervisor Shoebridge.
One thing I'd like to address is return on investment. The festivals are a large part of our income, and if we spare a dollar to lose them, what are we out? For benefits and for other income. So I see the benefit of bringing other dollars from different areas to help cover this, because we did spring this on them on the last minute last year, and that isn't very good business practice. And so I'd like to just encourage people to think about the total business and not the politics of having a fair, running a business, and needed expenses.
Supervisor Flater.
Thank you, Chair. Question is, yeah, we know that there's a lot of impact on area income. What can we have a figure of how much the 0.5% on their sales generates the county? Figures.
Those, I mean, I can't give you those numbers like what unless the event wants to show those to us. I mean.
Well, that would be a nice thing.
Yep.
That, you know.
I would just, and I'll base this off of the information that they shared, that if they pay $1 million in sales tax, roughly the 0.5% is going to be 100,000 then.
Okay.
All right, Supervisor Hennick.
So we're spending a dollar to save a dime, kind of, is what I'm hearing. Is that an accurate analogy?
It's fair. It's subjective, but fair. I'm not going to.
Is the total benefits, from the best of your knowledge, is the total benefits that the county reaps from the fair making up for the 50,000 that we're going to be spending? Best guess.
I believe that really is up to each individual supervisor and kind of their perspective and decision. I can't speak for all 21 of us on that particular topic.
Thank you, sir.
Supervisor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Having been through this last year, the main reason last year that we had the exception for the time and a half was the fact that it actually changed after the contract was already in place. You know, when the union negotiation came and everything that was afterwards. To bring that forward again this year, we already know what it is. I believe it's just, I just don't think that makes sense. Just a complication, the way the compensation is worded, I don't even know where the rate of reimbursement didn't include health insurance, overtime, and now it's time and a half instead of it just the actual based on salary and fringe benefits. It seemed to be straightforward just to make it based on salary and fringe benefits, plus we put the paragraph at the end where there can be an appeal process going on, as opposed to making it as complicated as this. I don't know what other businesses we would do this with. I mean, when Supervisor Shoebridge said we run it like a business, okay, if you're running it as a business, how many other businesses will lobby to spend the taxpayers' money because they have a particular issue or something? They've been in business for 30 years and going through problems. Should we give them trouble? I hate the precedence going on this.
Supervisor Seidlitz.
I'm just going to piggyback on Chuck, what he just said, but how many counties would take a contract and force a taxpayer to pay more than what the county pays? I don't think that is right. And then the other thing I want to say is $6.7 million comes in sales tax. Yeah, we only get a fraction of that. Say we get, $500,000 worth of sales tax from the percentage we get. There's a lot of mom and pop businesses that depend on this festival. It's not just this festival. If this festival goes out because the music industry is not thriving, what people think is going on with the music industry, that money is gonna send waves down to small businesses in that area within probably a 10 to 15 mile radius of that festival grounds. They're gonna suffer. And I think this is critical funds. I know Pete mentioned the critical funds. This is critical funds because if we lose this money, it's not coming back. There's not going to be somebody that just comes back and magically brings in 50% tourism or 50% plus tourism. That's all I have to say.
Are there any other questions or comments? Supervisor Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess I do have one more. How long are we actually gonna let this roll for? Like, so this one will end in 2028. But
Yes.
then come 29 to whatever, they're gonna ask for the same thing, correct? I mean, because we already set the precedent.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things there. I mean, maybe I'll try to answer the best I can. That would be my assumption. Like the union contract goes through the end of next year. So potentially the double time could be renegotiated. I've told the executive committee it's very difficult to take it out without giving up something else. So I would anticipate that might stay in there. But yeah, I would anticipate if the double time is still in the union contract that we'll be having this discussion when we do the 29 and beyond contract.
Supervisor Gutmann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think there's any doubt that we love the festivals. I think that's a strong value of mine, and I can't speak for the rest of people. And I think that there is a lot of return on investment. I'm also going to preface that there are a lot of other additional challenges that I think we are all trying to weigh. One of them is the public tax dollar. Where do people feel in private versus public? We have a wonderful music industry. We don't have the opportunity to see a 990 so that we know exactly what kind of funds that they are bringing in to their typical, like a nonprofit. So that's difficult. And then in addition, as I'm looking at some of the EMS issues facing our county, and certainly having a strong appreciation for our staff, we are really struggling with workforce. It concerns me that as a nurse, we have folks that are working already full hours, not just during the summer season, but all the time. With the amount of overtime that we just saw presented in the budget, it concerns me that we are having human beings that are on this type of work schedule, and the human body just is not meant for that. And we can see that in various ways in how our workforce is challenged every day to meet the kinds of things that they have to take care of. So I'm concerned about how we proceed, not only for this particular contract, but I think also looking towards the future. Concerned about setting precedent, concerned about how we treat our staff, and trying to balance all of those things. So I think that these are huge issues. I'm also looking at the budget that we just had presented and the amount of overtime that is being paid out. I come from a time period when we've lost services and programs because we were running in a deficit, and we've closed shop on home care services. So how are we going to move forward depending upon all of these various issues and variables affecting our decision? Thank you.
Supervisor Hennick, I'm going to jump to Supervisor Bachman because he's not had an opportunity to speak twice. I'll circle back. Supervisor Bachman.
I guess my question is, what happens happens if this fails? What's the outcome? What's the,
Yeah, I would say the existing or former contract is still in effect. The ordinance is still in effect as well, the amended ordinance. So I mean, it's imperfect, but we would work through it. I mean, the sheriff's department's still going to provide the law enforcement services to the festival within the ordinance. Yeah, the administrative review is not in the contract, but it's referenced in the ordinance, and we were able to work through an appeal last year without having any formal process in place. So yeah, I mean, I'd say we'd still get through it.
so you could go off the existing, they could still appeal like they did last year of the double time?
Yeah. We also can work, I mean, right now, time is of the essence only because the Force Fields event is in June. And we've, any time a new contract goes into place, it'll go into effect immediately. So if we get it done in May or June, then it would go into effect for the next festival after that. I think we're working in good faith with the festival, and I think they feel hopefully the same way. We'll make it either way.
Supervisor Kempe.
I just wanna, I guess, for the air show and stuff, are we still doing them double time? Or what are we doing for those guys down there?
If I don't believe we have a contract with the air show. Sheriff?
If we have a contract with the air show, if it comes back around, which is funded by the Boy Scouts, the Jim Falls Lions Club, the Sturgeon Fest, any of those organizations would be non-governmental and they would be paying double time as well.
Right. That's the answer. Any non-government contract falls under the double time now.
Air show will probably be next year. Yep, which will be next year, which will be WPPA contract too. That's something to consider, that whatever precedents you set here, you have to apply to the Boy Scouts, the Lions Club, anybody that has us come help move a house, any of those businesses are impacted the same way. It's not just the music festivals, it's all those other charitable organizations that we help out.
Does that answer your question? All right. Supervisor Bolmar.
Thank you, Supervisor Boudreau. I think this has really been a great conversation, and there's been a lot of time spent thinking through all of the detail here. And I think it's important that we recognize that this contract, like every contract that we work with in the county, is an evolution of process. And we've evolved to this point. And I would like to appreciate the work that has been done and the work and conversations that will continue to be done over the next 3 to 5 years. And hopefully we can create an environment where especially nobody loses. We want to, if possible, we can create an environment where everybody wins, but definitely not one where everybody loses. So I think it's important here to acknowledge the work that's been done, to acknowledge the conversations that have had. Is there money to be worked on? Absolutely, without a doubt. I'm not denying that there's a cost here, but I think there's also a greater good involved. And I would be in favor of moving forward with this.
All right, Supervisor Hull.
Just a clarification, at the very end, it says the decision of the executive committee constitutes final administrative determination. So if there's an amount of money involved, does that meet all of our requirements for the county? Let's say it ends up being more than $50,000 or $60,000. But it sounds like the executive committee is the final decision without the board being involved. Is there just a clarification on what that means?
I'm ready to defer to council.
Well, I mean, if anything, if there were an appeal, it would be to reduce the amount. We wouldn't be paying out more. So it wouldn't be the expenditure of more funds where we need the county board to approve that.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify that.
I mean,
because
the only reason
the whole reason we have the second thing on here, because if we decide against, we reduce it by $80,000. Well, now we're down. Where does it come from? Then we do have to do a budget thing. But I'm just
the only reason it was the executive committee was put in there is because that's that's the track we had been going on the last
Gotcha.
couple of years.
Well, it's worded as the final administrative decision, so you may, budget-wise, still has anything,
And you're welcome to.
anything goes through. Okay. And then just one comment on if we do not approve this, I think one of the important things that needs improved is the earlier part about the sheriff's department determining how many people, because it does not match our present ordinance that we had. I mean, that was one of the issues that we addressed. Remember last year, I believe the ordinance had specific numbers of peoples and things. And I remember there was a concern, okay, so what if at the moment, we're kind of adjusting it. They have been working with the festival to adjust it down and stuff like that. Well, a big event like a tornado comes, and we're not staffed to what the ordinance said, or you were worried a little bit liability because we're not following our part when we actually were trying to reduce our costs. I believe what we have in the part of this ordinance here is that in words to adjust the ordinance to match what the contract had said. You remember that whole conversation?
Yeah.
We-
I believe the
The language in section 3B references 1467B8, which is where we have those numbers that the sheriff's department can adjust up and down. And we also say in the ordinance that it's the sheriff or the designee in their sole discretion are able to do that based on the criteria in 1467.
That's part of our modification, though.
Correct.
I'm saying if we don't approve this, then we have that disparity between the present contract and what the.
Oh, I see.
That's what you're saying, yes.
So that's why that first part is kind of important, whether you're worried about the compensation or not. That's kind of important for us to get in.
Thank you.
I mean, anybody
Yeah, that makes sense.
know what that means?
All right, Supervisor Hennick.
There's a lot of controversy and ambiguity here. I'd like to make a motion to have a one-year trial on this, whatever is voted on. If we successfully vote on this to move forward, that we have a one-year trial as an experiment. And if we're happy, great. If we're not, we have a vehicle to adjust in 1 year.
From a procedural standpoint, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any motion at this point would need to amend something specific in this contract because that is what is on the floor.
Okay.
So go ahead, sorry.
Make a motion to, if we go into a budget deficit, that we have an option next year to redress that. We may accept it, we may find this is good business, but I'd like to find a way out if it's not good business.
So, are you trying to say, you want to amend the contract to 24 to 25? Or just 1 year?
Just a 1 year, just to see that if this works, great. If not, we have a way to review it next year.
So, just say that you want to amend the current contract to expire December 31st, 2026.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for the contract to expire in December 31st, and to see how we like it, and move forward if we find it's good business. If not, we have an out.
That would require a second.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to, if I'm gathering it correctly, change the end date of the contract?
It's already in conflict because the contract requires that in order to terminate the contract, you have to do it by March 31st of the contract. You know, March 1st of any contract.
So what Corp Counsel is saying is we've already passed our deadline this year to be able to cancel it at the end of this year. So the motion's in conflict with the current legal agreement we have with the music
Well, I'd
festival.
like to make a motion to go to the legal limit whenever that is.
Can you withdraw? Is that? First, Supervisor Hennick, I would need you to withdraw your original motion and have Supervisor Kelly consent to that before we can make another motion.
Thank you. I withdraw my motion.
All right.
I'd like to make a second motion to go to the legal limit of where the contract ends. I just want to put a safety clause in there. That's all I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to make us not lose forever. If it works, great. If we find the money, great. No harm, no foul, and the contract keeps going.
He's a lawyer. I don't speak to
At this point,
anybody.
it's very difficult. We'd have to, it's worded very carefully, the language of the contract, and you're speaking in generality, so it's very difficult to know exactly what to insert in the contract. You'd have to remove language from the contract to add language to the contract. I think we're trying to.
Well, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Before we go further, do we have a second on that motion? Motion dies for no second. Back to the original document and contract discussion. Do we have any additional questions? Supervisor Gutman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question potentially for Sheriff Hakes, if I might.
Yes.
Sheriff Hakes, in regard to the discrepancy between 30 to 50,000, maybe even a little bit more, between the time and a half and the double time, there was a suggestion that potentially you may be able to work some magic. Do you have other ideas in regard to that, or is that needing to just depend upon, because I get it, that each music festival is going to be dependent upon whatever happens at that music festival and that type of thing. But in general, do you have any other thoughts in how you could manage to absorb it in a different way, or manage it? And I know that you can manage your officers and assignments as well, but just checking to see if you've given that any thought.
I have. We have looked at, like I said, we've looked at the Force Fields contract. Force Fields has increased a lot. I think some of the conversation with last year with our numbers and the discrepancy between what we had staffed versus what ordinance called for. Last year, we grossly overstaffed Force Fields. It was an unknown. We didn't know what we were going to have. This year, you know, we have staffing and we have a little historical data. So I think that based on the overages from Force Fields with time and a half to double time, it's going to be around 11,000. The population the attendance population is pretty consistent across all three festivals. So that's tracking to be around 33 to 35,000. Obviously, you know, if the crowd is quiet, we try to send people home. We try to get creative. Just today, I was talking to someone who was interested in coming as a reserve. You know, if that person comes, if they work 36 hours up at the festival, that would be one person that would be at straight time at $25 an hour as opposed to double time at $60 or $70 an hour. So it's kind of an ebb flow, but answer that the most direct I can. I think that they said 33,000, but then again, last year, someone stood in front of the board and said it was going to be 8,000, and it ended up being a lot more than that. So I would hate to tell you 33 and it'd be 34. I'd love to tell you it's 33, 28 though, right? So, I mean, I can tell you that we'll do the best that we can.
Thank you.
Supervisor Lotz.
Thank you, Chairman Bergeron. During the executive committee, Mr. Dutton was there. He also told us that he'd been working with underage drinking citations. Also that because the festivals have their own security, they can't write citations. So that's why Chippewa County needs to really be there.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of it's coming down to pay. But a lot of us probably want to keep the rest of the verbiage in there. So I would like to make a motion to strike in section 4A with overtime rate pay calculated at time of 1/2. I'd like to stricken and then put in there with pay at the current union contract pay rate or whatever. And then they can come back and appeal the decision later.
If I could make it would essentially be the stricken currently was the original. That was what we were originally working on, the collective bargaining. It would default back to the original language because that was amended at exec committee. Is that essentially what your motion is trying to accomplish? Okay. Is there a second?
A second.
Supervisor Hall. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to, in all intents and purposes, go back to original language, contract language. As you see, the stricken would be unstricken, and the, in red, the with overtime rate of pay calculated at time and 1/2 would then be struck from the agreement. Do we have any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, we will vote in this. Oh, you're not ready? Typing it? We're not ready. One more.
Mr. Chair, if you could just reiterate what a yes means and a no means,
Yep.
because the double negative thing can get.
Sorry. So yeah, so a vote yes here on this amendment. We're not voting on the agreement as a whole. We're voting on just the amendment. We'll then have it read, taking into account overtime rates of pay and collective bargaining agreements, meaning we will require them to reimburse at actual cost of law enforcement provided, and it would strike with overtime rate of pay calculated at time and 1/2 is what a vote yes would be, supporting that move. No would be to leave it as currently presented on the screen. There? All right, we will vote on the amendment. All right, amendment passes 14-6. We are back to, so now we're back to the agreement as amended, having it back to taking into account overtime rates and pay of collective bargaining agreements. Do we have any additional questions on the contract in front of us? Seeing none, we will, are you ready for the vote on this one? All right, we will vote on the agreement as amended. Agreement passes 18-2. With that the agreement was amended back to the paying full costs of services provided. That does make business item number 2 unnecessary to take up. Am I correct on that, Administrator?
That's correct.
Yeah. We will move on then to ordinance 5-26, ordinance to amend section 58-39, parent C of the Chippewa County Code of Ordinances, designated all-terrain and utility terrain vehicle routes. This is a second reading. We'll be voting tonight. What question, we talked about this last month at the first reading. Do we have additional questions for Highway Commissioner Elstrand? Oh, sorry, I need a motion and a second on the floor. My apologies.
I make a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Now what questions do we have for Highway Commissioner? Last call on questions for the addition of the new ATV, UTV routes. Hearing none, we will vote on the ordinance. One second, I apologize. We need a cue or something. Hand signal. All right.
Ever get a little green light?
I know.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of buttons. All right, so
He took a break.
Oh,
he left.
Supervisor, okay. Yes, release vote. 19-0, ordinance passes. Then we will move on to business item 4. This is ordinance to amend section 5831 of the Chippewa County Code of Ordinances regarding speed zones. Chris Elstrand, second reading. Need a motion to put it for approval.
Later, so moves.
All
Yeah, I got it.
right, we have a motion and a second. What questions do we have for the Highway Commissioner on this one? This is second reading. No questions. We will vote on this ordinance amendment. All right, you release. 19 yes, 0 no. Passes. And then we have go on to number 5, purchasing policy revisions, first reading. Yeah.
All right, so the purchase policy is being updated due to new legislation that was signed by the governor for the competitive bidding threshold. The changes are in the public works section. The amounts for competitive bids increased from 25,000 to 50,000. So any projects over 50,000 now need to go out for competitive bids. And then also a class 1 notice must be given for contracts with estimated cost between 10,000 and 50,000, which is an increase from 5,000 and 25,000. That are the only changes, is the change in dollar amounts.
Do you have any questions? All right, that's first reading. We will wait till next month to vote. There are no, we have a county administrator appointments. County administrator appointment for the ADRC board. Kathy, help me out with that, administrator? Students camp, yes. Yes, as presented on your agenda. For a motion to approve.
We'll make a motion.
30 seconds.
All right, we have Hardy, Supervisor Hardy. All right, do we have any questions on the administrator's appointment? Seeing none, we will vote on approval. Release. Appointment is approved. On to number 11, which is agenda items for future consideration. Anything? Yes?
Just make a quick announcement.
Yes, absolutely.
So just to piece it together, just like the movies, like the preview of coming attractions. So the meeting next week on the 19th, those who are putting it together, the handout gives you a little bit of information to read through in preparation for that. Some of you have heard the presentation last year from the Health Cooperative about the request. The executive committee in the fall when we heard it. So we're restarting that process. The Health Cooperative has asked the county to fund a $10 million loan for the state trust fund loan. We would borrow it, we loan to them. That's the request. So next week, you're gonna get a presentation from the cooperative. What you have there is a little bit of preview information. They will be able to give you the full pitch on where they're at, how things have evolved, what the request is. The plan is to have that all next week. And then at a meeting in June, you'd actually be confronted with making a decision on whether or not you want to participate in that loan.
If anyone has anything else, please feel free to get it to myself or Mr. Alvarado. And we will move on to agenda item number 12. Look for a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Peter.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion in a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.